Dr. Duke, and this is Constitution Corner. Well, Constitution Corner is one of my favorite segments of the week because it gets us to reflect not necessarily on this amendment or that codicil, but to reflect on what the Constitution says about our modern world. And the big issue again today, I think, for the Constitution is these red flag laws. And, it's a very, very difficult, one of those issues that forces people into a very serious discussion of civics. On the one hand, you have these random shootings, which trouble everybody. They are frustrating. The level of emotion when these shootings occur is understandably through the roof. It doesn't help that you have the American media there with their gas cans turning the heat of emotion into a conflagration of outrage. That's what they're good at. Certainly doesn't help the civic discourse. But whenever you have these terrible shootings, I think it's almost necessary, almost requisite to wait 2 weeks. Remember when your mom used to say to you, don't get mad. When you think you're going to go off, when you think you're going to be angry, stop and count to 10. There should be a mandatory 2-week counting to 10 period before any idiot politician or journalist or pundit spouts off about what should be done in the wake of the killings. Give us 2 weeks. 2 weeks out, we found out a bunch of things. That neither of those killers was a right-wing ideologue. Neither of the killers, El Paso or Dayton, was a doctrinaire conservative. Nope, didn't happen. A little bit more libertarian, a little bit more anarchist, a little bit more Elizabeth Warren supporting in terms of the Dayton killer. So let's stop with the knee-jerk reactions to blame all right-wingers and the NRA for everything that happens. Take that 2 weeks. But these red flag laws are a little bit concerning. On the one hand, it's not a bad idea to keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. The idea that there are some people, because of their history or their behavior, who shouldn't have guns. And here's a funny thing to me. The same liberals who say we should red flag anybody for any reason. You slapped your wife at one point, horrible thing to do, don't do it, but you slapped your wife at some point, or you were arrested for protesting one way or another, and so therefore you have your gun rights taken away. That gives you a red flag. The same Democrats who are advocating red flags for just about anything to keep guns away from people are the same Democrats who want convicted felons to vote in elections. I've even seen some of these progressives argue that when felons get out of prison, they should have their Second Amendment rights given back. So you can't have it both ways this way. And the big problem I have with these red flag laws is that ultimately what you're saying is that some government entity gets to decide who gets red flagged. I would feel more comfortable with enhanced background checks. I'd feel more comfortable, I should say, with the possibility that some people could be flagged if you could trust the government to do that in a politically neutral way. And to me, it is a much bigger danger to have government officials deciding who does and doesn't get red flagged. Imagine if you had Lois Lerner, right, the former director of the IRS under Obama, who was targeting conservative groups, denying 501c3 status to conservative organizations. Do you want Lois Lerner in charge, or someone like her, or Eric Holder? Do you trust Eric Holder to decide who gets red flagged and who doesn't get red flagged? You've got the academic left basically arguing that whiteness is synonymous with white supremacy, that to be white is to be toxic. Masculinity is toxic. According to these left-wing lunatics, you should be flagged just for being white and male. How many articles have you seen in the last 2 weeks about the disproportionate number of white men who kill other people? Notice how they don't take into account the fact, I get it, white men are more likely to take a gun into as they did in El Paso or Dayton, but you've got African Americans killing African Americans at numbers significantly higher in cities like Chicago, much higher on a national average than you ever have with these white lone gun nuts. But to suggest that we should flag African-American masculinity, all African-American males should be red flagged because of the killing numbers done by African-American males in places like Chicago or Baltimore or Los Angeles or New York, we would be called inveterate racists to suggest it. You can't trust this government. You can't trust any government to determine the mental health of potential citizens. And we don't want the intrusive ways that you would have to do it. You've got to be careful about these red flags, because as long as government is in charge of them, those red flags are going to be used to target political enemies, alternative political parties, We've seen the government, Obama's government, go after those who supported Trump in very vile ways, to use the power of the FBI to try to stop an election. I'm a little bit more concerned about what the government does than I am about the dangers of guns getting into the wrong hands. There are other ways, other means, other opportunities on a local level to address those issues without having to invite big government into the mix. My final closing remark, as always, honor the Constitution by understanding the Constitution. You wouldn't drive a semi if you didn't know how semis worked. Understand the Constitution, and we'll have a better America.